Shabbat Shalom. As I mentioned earlier, this week in our Torah portion, we read about a complex, multi-layered rebellion against Moses, Aaron, the leadership of the Jewish people. There are Levites involved, there are people of Reuben involved, there are generic Israelites involved. It's sort of a whole ragtag coalition of kvetchers. And I want to focus on one of those groups and a way in which they left a lasting impression, and I would actually argue a positive one, that they actually ended up making a change that perhaps they did not anticipate. So there are these 250 people who are not Levites who say we want to be able to bring who are not Kohanim, we want to be able to bring fire offerings before God. We want to be the priests. And so Moses says, Chu ish machtato, each of you should take a fire pan, an incense burner, and go before the altar. You go and Aaron. And so they each go, they put incense on their fire pans, they stand at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and then, as is the way with these things, a fire comes out from God and consumes the 250 rebels. And so that part kind of makes sense, right? This portion, basically, it's kind of like that scene in The Godfather where during the christening, like this guy gets killed this way, this guy, right? So all the rebels each come to an end in their own way. Some are swallowed up by the earth, some there's a plague, and then these guys are consumed by fire. What's fascinating to me about this incident is that God says to Eleazar, who is Aaron's son, who will someday be the high priest, but at the moment is not yet, take all the fire pans of those who sinned and make them into hammered sheets of plating for the altar. Because once they have been used for offering to God, they become sacred, and let them serve as a warning to the people of Israel. So there were different altars in the tabernacle, and one of them was copper plated, and that plating came from the remnants of the fire pans of those who brought this rebellious offering. This is actually really remarkable, right? These are people who rebelled against God, and yet the remnants of their offering are used as the coating, as the covering, as the decoration for the holy altar itself. And this is particularly striking because this is actually not the first time in the Torah that people have brought a fire offering, an incense offering to God that went awry. So Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, bring strange fire that was not commanded. They are consumed by fire, and their fire pans are never heard from again. Their incense pans are never heard from again. So we have Aaron's sons who are priests themselves who do something wrong. They are consumed by fire, and their fire pans, no one knows, burnt up as well. These people are average Joes, rebels against God. They are consumed by fire. There is nothing left of the people, right? But the fire pans remain. So Aaron's sons, the remnants, the ashes are to be carried off by Aaron's cousins, and there's no remnants of the fire pans. Here, the people are gone, but the fire pans remain and are in fact used to decorate the altar. Odd. And so the question is, what is it about these pans, right, that they are saved at all, and even more so that they're actually used in the tabernacle? Now, in some sense, you could say they are a warning, or it says they are a warning to the people of Israel, right? Every time you go to the tabernacle and you see, that's a very lovely coating you have on the tabernacle, right? It's like, you get a wrap on your, like got a wax on your car, whatever. Like, oh, what is that? Oh, that's what happened the last time someone tried to bring an offering they shouldn't have, right? It's like a reminder not to get too close, maybe. Rashi and Ramban talk about this a little bit. And actually what they suggest is that in some combination thereof, so Rashi says that in fact, in using the pans, even though they were rebelling, they made these fire pans holy. Because remember, Moses himself said, okay, take the fire pans. So they were, in some sense, following instructions. There was actually intent of holiness here. Ramban says, no, that's not the case. Their intent was all bad. But God said, since they were offered to me, they're mine now. I'm going to use them as I see fit. And those ideas of the medieval commentators get played out. Rashi, in particular, his idea gets picked up, and it's actually in the Red Chumash, I think, these two interpretations. Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook taught that the holiness of the fire pan symbolizes the role played by skeptics and agnostics in keeping religion honest and healthy. So the idea is that even though these guys went too far, that there was a seed of holiness, that because they were challenging the authority of human beings, right? They weren't saying we don't believe in God. They were saying we think you're wrong about how to get to God. And so Cook says there's a role, agnostics, right? People who fight the power, if you will, have a role in holiness. Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, Hamek Davar, says something similar, that they were not rebels and sinners, but they were just trying to be close to God. They were going about it the wrong way. So that we respect their intent, even though the way they carried it out was inappropriate. I'm actually going to suggest to you that while that is a noble way of thinking about it, that these rebels actually had some holiness in their intent. Like sometimes a rebellion is a good thing. We're about to celebrate July 4th. We really like the guys who rebelled against King George, right? We think they're heroes for the most part. But I'd like to suggest, in particular, this week, a lot's happened since last week. It's about 3 weeks until I'm scheduled to give the sermon again. So, I don't know. We got a lot of time. I could get my yayas out, but I'm not going to. I want to suggest this, that perhaps what's going on here is this is the seed of a very essential Jewish idea that when we come through destruction, fire, that there is a desire to make something holy of it. So in a very narrow sense, I'm struck as I read this story. About a year ago, I was in Sderot, which is a city not far from Gaza, and we were visiting people who were affected on October 7th. And at one of the synagogues, there is a menorah, a Hanukkah menorah that they made out of parts of rockets that had fallen on the synagogue. And so these are not like the ballistic missiles that are shooting. These are, like 6-7 foot rockets. It's still a pretty impressive menorah. This is not an ideal aluminum menorah by any stretch of the imagination, but it's nevertheless a pretty significant thing. But basically taking, right, the remnants of fire and destruction and making something holy out of it. And so when I think about sort of what has happened in the last 2.5 weeks, they have been terrible, horrible, and yet tremendously uplifting at the same time. And I think none of us know exactly what will be. 2 weeks ago, I suggested that if it was not the beginning of the end, it was at least the end of the beginning, that this was sort of the closing parenthesis to October 7th, in the sense that it is entirely possible that from the destruction of the last 2 weeks will emerge something that looks very different, will emerge a world that looks very different. And, so there are rumblings about Syria joining the Abraham Accords, right? There are conversations afoot that I will believe peace with Iran when I see it. But at the moment, the only threat that they're able to generate, at least for the moment, is still only in the realm of AI videos that I'm being sent constantly. And so in some ways, when Hamas and its leaders on October 7th decided that they were going to attack, they were actually planting the seeds of the destruction of many of their allies. I read yesterday that there is actually war going on in Hamas now, in Gaza now, between Hamas and the clans that are like, we've had enough of this. Like, we would rather be ruled by warlords than deal with Hamas. So we live in a world that is profoundly different than the world we woke up on October 6th, but also very different from the world that started on October 7th. And so in that sense, we don't yet know how the altar is going to be plated, right? It's funny, the Israeli authorities have had to issue warnings, like people are going out after the rockets fall and collecting souvenirs, like, oh, look, I got a solid rocket booster, look, I got, whatever it is. And so they're like, please don't do that, because there's explosives in there. The rocket fuel they use is actually poisonous, right? Like, don't pick up strange rocket parts. It's just not a good idea. Just good advice for everyone here. If you remember nothing else from this sermon, right? But Israelis being Israelis, I'm sure people are already making like coffee tables and, bongs, I don't know, whatever. Your parents can explain it to you. But the world of saying we are taking something that was an instrument of destruction and returning into a reminder of something else is a very basic Jewish idea. The idea that the altar is plated with the remnants of the fire pans of the rebels is something that we are actually living out in real time. That's what's happening in the realm of geopolitics, the world of history. But I want to make sure that we also think about it in light of where we are as individuals in this moment, and as we are as people just living our daily lives, our tragedies, our triumphs, our struggles. And we all have struggles in life. We all go through moments where relationships are challenged. We go through moments where we have to make tough decisions about the path of our career, where we have to struggle with challenges in our health and our abilities. And so Erica Brown, who is a contemporary scholar, writes, Korach's rebellion left a physical and historical mark in a place of continual ritual use. Incorporating the physical pieces of the past on the stage of forgiveness and expiation, thankfulness and devotion, creates a much fuller picture of the altar's significance. The altar was not merely a place where the Israelites offered sacrifices to mark personal events and emotional states. It was a place that offered individuals meaning precisely because it carried the past of an entire nation. The joys, the pain, the tears, failures were not ignored. They were memorialized through personal structure, through permanent structure. The complicated, hammered past is part of the ongoing present, where past evil is blended with the continuing spirit of goodness and optimism. So that is true on a national scale. I would like to suggest that it can be true on a personal scale as well. We all have the burnt fire pans of our own lives. The times when people wounded us, the times where we damaged a relationship, the times where we faced a struggle in our path of life, the times when we faced hardship, the times where we faced loss. And in essence, what our portion says is those are the things that we gild our altars with. That when we come to pray, when we move forward, those things actually don't hold us back. They can actually beautify ourselves and our prayer. That when we remember the slights we have experienced, the challenges we faced, we hold on to those things. Those actually enable us to appreciate, to sweeten, to beautify what it is that we encounter. And when we are carrying a loss with us, let that loss actually adorn our altar. When we pray, let the person we are thinking about be looking over our shoulder as we pray. When we feel guilt and shame for something we have done, let that be a fire that burns within us with greater intensity for us to do better going forward. And so it is not by accident. This is not simply a clever use of recycling that these fire pans are upon the altar, but in fact, the tragic, the traumatic experiences of our lives are in fact what strengthen our altars to engage in greater prayer, in greater strength moving forward, if we choose to use them as such. Shabbat Shalom.